Hi there, today I'm going to show you how to paint with watercolor and make this seashell. So I've tried a lot of different watercolor packs, but the one I really love is Aquarelle from Lisa Glanz on Design Cuts. So what I really love about this pack is it's not overwhelming. There's not, 3,000 different brushes. She's really distilled it down to the ones that are going to give you the best effects. So there's also some really great tutorials that show you how you can get these beautiful effects. That's definitely worth checking out, and there's a ton of color palettes as well. So this is a really great brush pack that I'm going to be using today. There's a link in the description below if you want to check it out. So to start, we're going to do a canvas size. I always use a square canvas because I find that's best for sharing on Instagram, and I make sure that it's 3000 by 3000 pixels and 300 dpi. That just means that it's going to be high enough resolution if I choose to use it for anything else. The first thing I want to do for watercolor, you really need paper texture. That is going to just elevate it and take your work so much further. And Lisa's provided 3 canvases with very subtle sort of paper textures. So I'm going to use this candy floss one, and she's laid out the canvas so that you can actually just paint straight in the canvas itself. But what I want to do is take it into a new canvas. So I'm going to copy the paper texture, this layer called paper, and then come back into my artwork layer, and then just 3-finger swipe, I'm going to paste that onto the canvas. You could just enlarge this texture, but I don't like to do that because quite often you'll lose quality. So I'm just going to make sure Snappy and Magnetics is on so that I can easily move this straight across to the other side of the canvas, and that will snap into position so that you're not moving it off the canvas. Then I'm just going to duplicate the layer and then take that copy over to the other side. And it's worth just zooming in so that there's no obvious seam that you can see, so it's a smooth layer. And now I'll merge that and we'll just call that texture, paper texture. Next, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to import the image that I found. So this is an image from Unsplash, really beautiful color palette, and a seashell with a lot of detail. So there's a link below if you want to use the same image as me. So I'm going to insert a photo because I've saved this locally on my iPad. Something I forgot to do is to just put my paper texture on multiply. That will mean that the texture will show through the artwork. So it's even already applied it to this seashell. Now I'm going to enlarge it. So I'll get that to the size that I want to be drawing at, and just make sure that's pretty much centered in the middle there. Okay, now I'm going to drop that opacity by tapping the little N. I'm going to drop the opacity right down so that it's just faded and I can just see through it. So I'm now going to trace over the top. So the color I'm using is just this brown, and I'm going to, in the Aquarelle pack, there's a sketching and detail pencil. So I'm going to start with that, and I'm just going to draw the outline of the shell. Right, so now I'm just going to rename my layer, so I'm keeping everything tidy, and I'll call that outline. Create a new layer under the outline, and for the moment we're just going to turn off the shell reference layer underneath because I just want a wash, a fill of the area. So one of my favorite brushes in this pack is the round brush all-rounder. It's really versatile and useful for especially large areas of ink like this, and I'm just going to use this sandy kind of color here to paint the base of the shell. So you'll notice with this brush, it's got a lovely texture to it. We're also seeing that paper texture as well come through. So if I turn that off, you'll see it's still got a really lovely feeling of watercolor on paper. And with that added paper texture, it just takes it to the next level. So it's really realistic. But with this brush, if you hold down and just carry on painting, you'll get sort of a seamless kind of wash. But you'll find if you pick up your pencil and then come down again, you'll get these sort of overlaps of ink build up. And that's really nice because that's actually what would happen in real life anyway. So if you're seeing it happen a little bit more than you would like, and you're finding you can't kind of keep your pencil down the whole time, don't worry. I'll show you a way that we can smooth out some of those in a minute. But just for the moment, we're just going to fill in this area. Okay, so once you've got your wash and you're ready to go, now we're just going to move on to the smudge tool, and we'll choose this wet blending brush and just blend out a couple of these harder edges. So we still want to keep some, we don't want it to be completely seamless, but just a few of these, it might be a bit too much. You might find you just want to reduce that a bit. So you can easily do it with this wet blending brush. You can also change the opacity on that if you're finding that it's blending it out too much. But that just smooths some of those areas. Now, another thing that I love to do is to just add a new layer and put a clipping mask on that layer. I'm going to choose like a slightly darker sort of tone color. So this is a good match, but it's just a darker tone of this color, this sandy color. And I'm going to come down, there's these amazing bloom stamps in this pack. So I'm going to go with the splotch oval for the moment and just stamp that. Doesn't even have to be all within the area. Just stamp that to the side of the shape, and you'll see that it's only stamping within the clipped mask area, but it's just adding sort of some realism and some splotches of different tones. So I really like the effect that that gives. Before we go any further and look at the detail of the shell, I'm not sure if you know about reference layers, but they're really useful. So if you come into the Actions tab and the Canvas panel, there's this reference. If you toggle that to on, what you can do is load an image. So I've got this, it has to be on your local iPad drive, but I can load this image. I can even zoom right in and change the crop of the image. And I can bring this shell in and keep it at the top of my canvas. Now, when I save out my image, it's not saved in there. It's not going to appear anywhere, but it's just a good reference to have in the side. So you can sort of see a zoomed out still of the shell. We also have this reference that we brought in of the actual shell, and we're going to use that now as well. Now I'm just filling in these wavy lines with a small size of the all-rounder brush, and just using that reference photo underneath remember we had the body layer. I've turned that off just so I can see a bit clearer, filling in some of these lines and details, and then I'm filling in areas of shading with both the brown and the orange color, just adding a bit more paint into the areas of shadow. Then I'm changing to the darker tone of the sand and just adding a little bit more pigment there, adding a couple more wavy lines here and there, and just filling in those shaded color areas. It takes a little while to just build it up. You need to build up the color and texture, but just keep adding paint in using your reference layer to just see where those colors are. Doesn't have to be perfect. Watercolor is a really forgiving medium. And now I'm starting to just smooth out any areas that are quite sharp. I'm using my wet blending brush and the smudge tool to just smooth out some of those harder lines so that it's a little softer. And now I'm just adding another layer on top to accentuate those wavy lines. So I'm first doing the brown layers, and then I'm coming back over and smoothing that out. And then I'm adding a bit more of that sort of orangey color. And then finally I'm finishing up with some white. So I'm using the sketching pencil for the white, and I'm just adding a little bit more detail and highlight with that white. And then finishing off with another layer of brown. So the same color as the stroke, and I'm just adding that brown, accentuating some of those divots in the shell itself. Okay, once you've got your shell details in place and you're happy with how it looks, we're going to paint the background. So as you can see, the original image has like this aqua. So I'm going to keep a very similar color to that, this aqua color. And I'm going to use this brush called Big Wash. And she's actually included some instructions, push down for more paint. So if you want a little bit more of the paint pigment on the canvas, just push down extra for that. I'm going to get rid of this reference now because I know what I'm going to do for the background. So we'll just get rid of that so we can see the background clearly. And make sure you're on a new layer. And then we just want to simply wash the background with this color. And pick up your pencil and give extra around the areas of the shell so that it's more coloured the closer to the shell it gets, and then it sort of fades off into the outside of the canvas. More pressure and more paint around the shell, so you get this lovely darker colour. Now what you might be able to see is happening is we're actually seeing that come through because watercolour is already a bit transparent. So what I'm going to do is just select this shell shape. So just go select and go back to your background colour. And now we want to just clear that area of the background. So if I turn off the shell, you'll see that I've made a clear area in the shape of the shell for the background so that we don't get the green coming through. So now I can even duplicate that background just to get it a little bit more intense, but I might take down that overlay slightly, that opacity slightly, just to reduce it a little bit there so it's just subtle. And for a final little touch, just add a new layer above the shell, and in here we've also got some drips and random splatters. So using this teal kind of aqua colour, I'm going to actually spray a little bit of the watercolour splatters to the side of the canvas and at the top. So you can figure out if you want the majority of the splash kind of off the shell, but it is nice for that colour to come onto the shell as well, which would happen, you know, you're painting on a piece of paper, it would kind of splatter and come onto the shell. So I like most of that. I might just remove that big one in the middle there, but I like a little bit of this colour coming through. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. The brushes used were Aqua Real by Lisa Glanz. You can grab them on Design Cuts if you like. There's a link in the description below if you want to find out more. Thanks again, and see you next time.